Hey guys, I wanted to show you a little something different that I've been doing. I like to have fun in Unity, and I was thinking maybe one day I could get this out as just a fun little sort of single player game. I have here, I've not been working on this too long, but I wanted to just show it as something different that I was doing. So I've got a zombie AI and I've got a first person shooter over here. Now, yes, I did wire these up from scratch, so these are not imported scripts. These are my own. Now, obviously taken, made through my self-learning process, which does involve learning from others. So I will preface it with that. So what you can see here is I have this third-person controller. Now, this is kind of a quirk. I was not aware of it, and actually, oh, hello, sir. You're there. Hello. So that guy actually teleported, and unfortunately, at the moment, they won't die. They don't seem to be taking any damage, or if they are, oh, I know why. My weapons aren't set to do any damage. That's why. Let me change that. And again, this is all a work in progress, but I just wanted to show it off. And I just wanted to maybe explain a little something as a little sort of Unity tutorial. You know, someone in another video in the emulator asked for like some videos of code alongs and things like that. Keep in mind, I am not a traditional programmer, so if I do anything like that, it might make the more computer technical and savvy people in the audience throw up in their mouths a little as I break all conventional rules. One of the best bits of advice I got was from my younger brother, who told me, and he's a computer engineer, so he's got, yeah, he just portaled. Yeah, there he is. He's got quite a bit of experience when it comes. He just portaled. There's no nav mesh in there. That's why he kind of came back out there. But one of the best bits of advice he gave me was he said that he's seen a lot of developers. What happens is they will try and future-proof their code, and so what that means is they will try and solve problems that they don't actually have. And I noticed that I was doing that with my own programming, and I could never get anything done because of that. So, for example, when you create a single player game or something like that, you can take a lot of shortcuts. When you're working on something like the emulator, there's an MMORPG is so much more complicated, right? So taking shortcuts is not exactly something that you should consider doing because it'll bite you in the butt later. But when you're making something sort of single player like this, you can take a lot of shortcuts. And what do I mean by that? Well, you can kind of sort of expose variables in ways that you probably wouldn't in another project, especially if you're working by yourself. There's no problem with that. So if I do a code along, it would be to maybe show concepts and not necessarily to teach best practices. So, anyways, you see these guys, they can aggro each other, so that's what they're doing there. I'm using an animation event-driven system, which is really cool because I can enable and disable collisions and things like that from animation. So when these guys attack, I can enable and disable their colliders for damage. So let's see if I can show you, like, maybe now these guys here, I don't know if they're trying to aggro each other there, or yeah, they're changing aggro constantly. Technically they shouldn't be aggroing each other, but oh well. So you can see some damage colliders here are hidden, but I can turn them on, and let's see if you can see it there. Maybe not. Oh, no. Okay. Well, anyways, when they animate, you'll see their damage colliders turn on. You might see it here in the, is that this guy? Yeah. You see that just flashed right here? And that's all being driven by animations. So that's a really cool system. It's basically a state machine. It's really nice and easy to work with. What you got to do is you have to come into your animations and set up the events. So you find your animations, which I use a override controller. and I just put the animations I want. So this is overriding what I call a humanoid base animator. And the humanoid base animator just has locomotion, which is idle, walk, and run. It's got turn right, turn left, and it's set up for 3 attacks, a stun, and then some dying. I do plan to add maybe a hurt animation, things like that. Again, this is all very super early stuff, so don't look at it as like anything set in stone. But so that's that. And then the other thing is you have to find the animation that you want to hook the event up to. So in this case, like attack 1, I have in here some animations on this. I think this is attack 1, isn't it? Zombie attack 1. Yeah. I just have to find the actual, there it is. So you can come down here and there's these things called events, and you see you can open and close damage colliders at various points of the animation. So it's really cool to be able to do that. Really makes the game, it really makes things feel responsive for players, and I think as a whole. Now, what's going on with this guy is he's teleporting, and I kind of wanted to show something you could do with these events. So actually what I did was, and I'll kind of walk you through how I did it, is I grabbed the animation, in this case the turn left animation on this zombie, which is uh, in the base AI humanoid thing, which I should probably put in the override animator, but I'll do that later. And I set up a animation event, if you come down here, and it's called drink, right? So what this does is when he gets to about here in his animation, he will call the drink event. Now, what does that do? Well, that comes to his AI controller script down here, and it does this. Now, one thing I forgot to do was if we successfully drink, then I want to decrement the count of charges on the item. So drink holder dot item, or drink holder dot charges minus minus minus. So he can only do this 3 times because that's what I set him up as. So what's cool about that is, again, I can call an event on a different item through the animation. So in this case, I created what I call an action item, which just inherits from an item, right? So here's your abstract class, it's an item, and items can be used. So now my weapon items do inherit from items. So they have a blank use function because I'm not using my weapon scriptable objects to control my shooting behavior. You can do that, but if you make a multiplayer game and you have multiple objects calling into a scriptable object weapon item, then if you're storing variables here, they'll get overridden by or changed by someone else calling in. So for a single player game, it's okay, but if you plan to make a multiplayer game, you don't want to use scriptable items, scriptable objects as drivers for, I don't know if there's a better word, but function calling, driving states, I suppose, driving states of the game. I don't know if that's the right term. What you can use these scriptable objects for is containing data. Now, I sort of broke that rule a little bit here that I'm telling you because actually if you go to my action item, which let me get back to is this one, you can see it's taking in a player or an object and it's doing an action. Now, that action can be anything because the actions are also scriptable objects. So in this case, what's happening to the zombie is he was teleporting. He's he's called the Zombie Clown Fruit Punch Teleporter. That's his name. He's the only zombie clown here with this item. So what happens is when he turns left, as long as he has any charges, he's going to use this item. Now, you could get really creative with this. You could set up a, if you wanted to, if you wanted the action to have a chance to fire and not be 100%, you could set up some percentage chance and do a little calculation here. And if it, is greater than some value, then yes, do the action. Otherwise, no, so that every time he turns, it's random as to whether he'll actually teleport or not. Now, how I applied this? Well, here's our abstract action class. That's our action item, which in this case is my purple fruit punch drink. And if you go to actions, again, we have these, but if you look at where this is being used, well, here I have a teleport action. And this is where I'm creating sort of a concrete implementation of this abstract actions class. And you, again, you can get creative. You can do more things. You could say public class, instead of a teleport action, maybe you have a, like scale multiplier, right? Transform scale multiplier. I don't know. Scale multiplier action, right? And then you get now, and again, it doesn't have to be transforms you're manipulating. Here I'm manipulating transforms. You can manipulate anything you want, really. And then here you could make a serialized field, and you could say vector 3, or you can say float scale multiplier, right? And then here you override that do action, bool do action, right? And then you take the caller, whoever's calling into this, and you just set their local scale you say is equal to a new vector 3, and here there's your default scale values, right? But now you multiply it by the scale multiplier. And if you really want to be specific, you could even break it down into multiplier for x, y, and z, and then you could make them look really weird if you wanted to. And then here I'm just going to return true. So now I could have a different item that has an action on it that when you use it, it does this, right? So we'll return true here. So in this case, what the zombie's doing is he's teleporting. Now, of course, if you do this, you want to be able to create this. So you say new transform scale multiplier action, and then here I say transform scalar, whatever. So I'll show you where these come up, but and then you can move it to its own class as well, because it needs to be in its own class to actually function properly. But so you see here teleport location. So now where is this in the project? It's a scriptable object. So I have it in a resource folder. And if I go over to my items, there's an item action here folder. And so you see this is what the item, this item in particular, the zombie teleporter fruit punch, is teleporting to, is calling to this, and this guy's saying, oh, well, that location is 000. So you could get, I mean, it doesn't even have to be an item, right? Now you could have usable, a usable portal in the world, a game object, right? That you create like a portal, you call it a portal, and you put on it that it's you can create a new class. I have an interactables class, which I think is very basic. Yeah. It just, I guess I suppose it should require a trigger because type of collider. So we should at least require a collider on this if we put it on there to force it on there, since we're setting it to trigger. I guess you could make a variable here too if you wanted it to be a trigger, or if you wanted it to use a collider or not. In this case, in a game like this, you probably want it to be a collider where the player can sort of run into a portal, right? I don't know if I have any portals here. Let me see if I have a portal. I have particle effects. Let's see if I've got a portal in here. I can actually, you can do this. I don't know if you know this, with a little neat trick. So you do T prefab and then you search. So in this case, I'm searching portal, and it does look like I have some portals. Okay, so there you go. So now I've got this portal, right? And it needs a collider on here. So let's put a collider, because you have to have one. Let's do a sphere collider, I suppose. Right? Okay, so why am I doing this? Well, I'm just going to show you how sort of free you can be with these things. So now maybe you want to call this something different, right? Maybe you want to make a child of interactable and call it interactable action, right? So like that, you can be very specific, right? So you create a different class and you say, well, this is an interactable, but it's an action interactable, right? And in this case, now I want an action, right? So this is where I was getting at. You can get all kinds of creative with that system we just made. I think I called it an action, right? An action item. So, well, this is the action item. Oh, actions is what I called it, so that it doesn't conflict with the action. So action, right? And then here you public override void interact. So when this is interacted with, you say public virtual, what's going on? Oh, that's right. I have to inherit from interactable. So now what I do when I interact is I say action dot. Oh, and then here when we interact, let's pass whoever is calling this interaction, right? So we'll say again, game object caller, and then we'll do the same thing here, game object caller, and we'll say action dot use or do action, and we'll pass in the caller, right? So now whatever this thing is, it's going to be on sort of this object, this portal here. In this case, it's going to be on a portal. But, you know, again, it can be anything, right? So let's say I want to teleport to the top of the roof here. So let's create, let's just put an object here and just figure out, let's see, maybe we can give it some sort of visual to help us out. Can we do that? Well, we can give it a little sphere. Let's just create a sphere. There we go. We're going to make it, you know, smaller. Okay. And let's add a material to it so it's not, do we have any materials? Material. I have materials from these other packets. Let's see. Material in here. Okay. Not the greatest, but that's fine. So we'll add that on there. Now we can disable this when we don't want it to show, but just so we know what exactly this position is for this object. Oops, sorry, I did that wrong. You don't want to move the child. Oh, if you move the child, you're not going to get the right spot. So let's move the parent here. So now this parent is at position right here. So we can go ahead and copy this position. Okay, so now we got our portal, and we can call this like rooftop position, right? And then we're going to disable this. The only reason I'm naming this here is because I want to know when I have this, and I'm going to change this as well, interactable. Do we have an error? Is that why I can't? Did I not? Interactable action. What happened to this guy? Why is he not showing up? It inherits from interactable, and this is a mono behavior. Okay, let's just move it to its own class and force Unity to sort of update. I'm not sure why it wasn't showing up there, but I want to add that onto the portal here. There it is. Okay, so now I'm going to put this action, right? But I'm going to create a different thing. And you know, actually, there's a couple other things I wanted to kind of say. If you feel like it's getting tedious to making all these actions, which it can be depending on how you're using them, there's another way that you could do it, and I'll just tell you about it. I won't do it because it'll take forever. So here's our, where's our scriptable objects? Resources, items, there they are. So that's the zombie teleport, and then this is the, so in this one, I'm going to duplicate this one, and I'm going to call it teleport to rooftop, and I'm going to paste the location, and then I'm going to go ahead and put that on there. So in theory now, when I use this, I should get portaled up there as a player. The other thing I wanted to tell you was you could create just a generic teleport action that has nothing like this, but you have to tell it the location you want to portal to. Now, if you do it that way, you know, you're going to have to somehow know that you're dealing with a teleport action. So maybe you could create like an action type, right? Not an input action type, but like an action type that all actions have, right? So you have actions, and then you have an action type here that you say, you know, get action, and then you switch on the action type. So, for example, if you get back an action type of teleport, then you know that when you do action, you can cast that action into a teleport action, and then here you could require, you know, you could change this to public void teleport, and then you would have access to this. You know, a caller, and you would have the location, right? So you could do it that way too. So, and here it's okay to use the scriptable objects like this because we're not storing data and manipulating the data on them. We're just we're performing a function on an object, which is okay, even if you have multiple objects calling to this teleport action, because it's going to take each object and move them to that position and return true. If you were trying to store data or change data on this and you had multiple people trying to call to this object to change data on it, when someone else calls to get data back from it, they very well likely will get a totally different value that they didn't input because someone else called to the same object and manipulated that data. So that's why scriptable objects, like, you have to sort of be careful how you use them. In a single player game, it's totally fine because no one else is going to be using those objects. Now, granted, if you have AI, pets, enemies that may want to use similar objects as the player, then that can create problems there. But now on my character, I do have on my controller skip, I do have an interactables function where I get the interactables and detect interactions. So I get these, and I add them. So I was just tracking them. I wasn't doing anything with them. But I could in here say, we could have like a use. I think I have a use key, right? An interactable, yeah, interact. So I could say is, somewhere in here. Obviously, I'm dead. I don't want to interact. I could anywhere else. It doesn't matter whether I'm moving, I'm rotating. It doesn't matter. If I'm interacting, I probably don't want to be able to interact because I'm doing something else at the moment. So I want to ignore that input. So we'll say if not is interacting, and then I can say if I've got an input controller dot use. I don't know if I have on my input controller if I actually have sprinting, jumping, input, shoot. Doesn't look like I have something for that. So I could add it here. So we could say public bool use key get private set, and then we'll just default it to, I guess, E. We'll say use key is equal to input dot get key down key code dot E. Okay, so now I'll come back into my controller and I'll say if the input controller dot use key and now the thing is I'm not sorting these by distance, so it'll use whatever was first put in, and I don't know how that's necessarily grabbed, so you might want to sort that so that you always use the closest object if it's usable. And I would say, I guess, if input, so I say if interactables 0 dot, is there, I think it's interact, right? Interact. So I'm going to pass in this. Then I want to, you probably want to iterate over the number of interactables, right? So for less than interactables dot count, I say if input controller, sorry, if interactables I dot interact, and I'm passing this game object. So if I do successfully interact, then I just want to break out of this. I don't want to go to the next object and try and interact with it. And in fact, I probably want to remove this from the list. However, I'd have to see how I'm handling this. And what you want to do is probably, in here, maybe, have a public or a protected bool used, or can be used, right? Equal to true, defaulted to true, unless you want it to be defaulted to false, I guess, if you want to trigger it, right? So maybe you want to trigger it by some sort of other event in the scene or something like that. So then you say if can be used, then, and here we're going to make bool, because I want to know whether I actually used it. If can be used, then, we're going to do, but this is really, should be an abstract class in general, because I don't really want just a default interactable. I want to implement a concrete sort of functionality in classes that inherit from it. So in this case, I have the other interactable, the action interactable, right? Which is interactable action. And it's got that. So we'll make this bool, and then we'll say public override bool interact. Yeah, it doesn't return. So we'll say return true, right? And then we'll say here, if not can be used, then we want to return false, right? And maybe for the interactable action, and again, you could sort of control this anyway. Maybe on here you say, you have a float reset time, right? And then you have an update loop here because you want to basically prevent someone from spamming whatever this is, right? So then you say, if not can be reused and return false. Otherwise, action, you say, if action do action, if the action was successful, then can be used, you set it to false. And, here you say you have a private float times since last used. You default it to infinity, right? Okay, if action do action color can be used false, and then time since last used is equal to 0. You just used it, right? And then you return true here. Otherwise, you return false. Return false. And then in here, you can say, you're going through this update loop, you say if, times, you just do plus, right? So you say if not can be used, so it means it's been triggered, right? Then I want to do time since last used, and I want to add, a second to it every second. And then I say if time since last used is greater than the reset time, well, then can be used as true. And maybe on here, you have another flag that says, oh, well, this is private one time, one, maybe charges is equal to, so you have a private int charges, right? Again, you default it to -1. -1 means it has infinite charges, right? So then what you say is you go in here, do action, so then you say if charges, whew, oh, I guess I made it private. I want to make it protected so it can be accessed. So charges. So if charges, actually, you know what? You don't even need to do that there. You say if not can be used, and, right? And charges is greater than 0, right? Well, no, and charges does not equal -1. Or you don't have to use, why is it still coming up as protected? Oh, I'm not even following my own nomenclature. So yeah, if it can't be used and the charges aren't -1, then we're going to do this and we're going to set that. But the issue I could see here is, when you're decrementing this, so if charges is greater than 0, then charges minus minus, right? So now if the charges are greater than 0, then they're going to go down. This will get set to false. And actually, yeah, if not can be used, return false. If charges is equal to 0, then return false. So if you have 0 charges left, then, but you start at -1. So everything will default to being reusable after a certain amount of time. And maybe your reset time, and again, you could probably move this into the interactable as well. But if you're handling this sort of uniquely here in this, then, you could keep that here. What you might do instead as well is have this be sort of a virtual thing that handles some of the more generic stuff like this. And then this it calls to the base class, it runs all this. If the base returns true, meaning that you can be used, your charge aren't 0, etc. Then you run your other logic, which in our case is whatever this action is. So now, after doing all that, we've got the teleport there. So we're not going to teleport to vector 0. We're going to teleport to the rooftop. And one last thing I want to check is the controller here. Perfect. So if the interactable interacts, then we break, right? So let's see, I've got the portal there. It has a sphere collider on it. I think it needs to be, I made it so it has to be on interact. Does it need to be on a special layer? Let me double check that, how this is working. Nope, there's no special layer. It's just looking for it's actually not even looking at the tag either. So let's see how this works for this one. I mean, I would assume theoretically to get portal to the top there, but I don't know. There won't be any fancy effect or anything. All right, so I come up here. I think we set the E key. Nope, that didn't work. Am I getting the call? Let me see what my player has for interactables. Oh, I'm not even finding any interactables. That's why. Oh, I should probably set a hit effect as well for this character when he gets hit. Interesting. Let me just see what's going on with that. So it's an interactable. Charges, -1, can be used. Reset time, doesn't have a reset timer. Okay. So the issue is overlap sphere. Am I calling this? I'm detecting the interactions here. Okay. It does inherit from interactable, so it should, in theory. What we could do is, let's debug.log. I mean, this is one way to debug. So interactable. Let's just see what it's interactable's I.name. Let's see if it's even colliding with it. Oh, I wonder if my interaction radius is 0. That would be a problem too. If you don't have an interaction radius, you're not going to interact with anything. Let me see what I set that to on the player. If it's that, great. Okay. Unity sometimes takes its sweet time loading. So let's see, interaction radius. What is it set to? It's set to 6. Huh, interesting. Well, let's see. And this is an interactable, correct? Yeah. Is the sphere on it too small? Is that what it is? What's the sphere? No, the sphere is decent size. I wonder if it has to be a trigger. I'm not using any kind of layer detection. I'm just using my position. It has to be within a certain angle. I wonder if it's this. Let me get rid of that because I think I might have screwed that up. I was trying to make it so that only the things that are in front of the player would be added, but maybe I've screwed that up. So let me just get rid of that. And I'm not resetting the interactables, am I? I don't think I'm resetting them anywhere. So let me just make sure I'm not. Oh, I knew them at the very start. So basically I come back down here and I knew it. So I come through here, I pick up the interactables, and then when I come back through this loop again, I'm already gonna be yeah. Okay, that should be fine. Let's see if I actually detect any this time. The other way would be to remove that new and just see if I'm picking anything up. Let's see. Yeah, portal. There it is. I'm interacting with it. It's printing it out. So it's there. Okay. Oh, it went away. Ah, there we go. Aha! See? Get me now, Mr. Zombie. Yeah. Anyways, long story short, guys. Sorry that the video went so long. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully, you learned something, and maybe something like this would be stuff you'd enjoy seeing more of. Yeah, let me know. I'm prone at the moment. I don't have a body, obviously, because the third-person controller is disabled. Oh, you can kind of see my body, actually. Look, you can see me. I'm sort of looking up in the sky, but there you go. Let's see, where am I looking now? It's always going to go up to the sky, yeah. Yeah, there's my silhouette. So it does leave a shadow, right? Which is kind of cool. You can sort of see your own shadow, I guess. Oh, that's right. I don't have fall damage, thank God. I actually scared myself there. I was like, I'm going to die. No, I'm good. I'm good. All right. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.